Excellent. Thank you, Nalini. Um, I know we all had some gripping conversations in our breakout rooms because we could relate so much to the both questions, really, because they had to do with how we were feeling and what we would do next, which are questions that we might not have asked ourselves. Our opening speaker really did say, yeah, I had to stop and check in with myself. And so we're all at this point needing to make sure that whatever we do, we need to check in with ourselves. Because there's some important discussions that we might have to have with ourselves as we face tomorrow, whatever tomorrow is. Some of it in our control, some of it outside of our control. So, wow, here we are today. Some of us speechless at the activities that we witnessed on national and international stage coming from this election. For some of us, it was a I told you so. I'm not surprised. For others, shocked beyond belief. If you've been a frequent participant here, you know that our true desire is to ensure that we're helping each other in a meaningful way, ensuring that we're navigating through all these challenges safely and carefully. Some of us having great heaviness coming from the darkest places where we've experienced tragedy, where we have isolated ourselves because we can't relate to what's happening. All having a different experience, but coming together today and days past to connect the dots. So I'm going to ask Dr. Clifton to share out first. We'll go through the rooms, and then I have some closing comments. Dr. Clifton?
Okay, thank you. I'm on. You can hear me. I'm unmuted.
You are unmuted.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, good. Yeah, actually, muted is a good word. In the sense, well, the opening talk was just so wonderful, and we first started on the points of stopping, um, as as a way of getting in touch with yourself. But we talked about habitual or historically Sabbath was a stopping exercise. You stopped your habitual way, and you could, you don't have to go into the catechism or the theology, but if you stop the habitual way, you have a better chance of hearing your voice. And people shared of how one of the guys in the group, really talked about, like, when you stop, you can brave the darkness, and the darkness that the last 4 years have been. It might be coming to an end, but we go through the darkness, and there's light to be found, and compassion to be found. And we also had a lot of discussions about what distracts us from the self, or the deeper self that you find at the bottom. And you have to have courage to go into the bottom, to go into the darkness. But um, uh, we talked that that's where the deepest light, the deepest compassion, and hope is found. So being aware of it, like the entertainment business, the power it has to reflect unconsciousness, in the sense that you get so caught up in that, you're not seeing the injustice and the pain, and it takes you away from the compassion. And then when we go into the deeper self, and we're called to listen to ourselves, and anyone that does that can't not be compassionate, can't not be horrified by the injustices of the world at times. But we're in the darkness, but we're sharing it together, which is a very hopeful feeling. And we're all different, but we're all the same in compassion, I think, when we dance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was a moving, great group with everyone sharing it. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jerome, can you share from your room?
Absolutely. So first of all, I had a really awesome and wonderful group of people, some of them engaged into, social services, to life coaching, to artist and educator, so a scientist, so very mixed. And we started the conversation with perhaps the idea and the notion of feelings, and that somehow, we don't take enough time to take a step back and perhaps reflect on indeed doing this check-in as our introduction speaker talked about. And that it's important to understand that trying to express our raw feelings is also part of the healing process. In other words, take the time to just scream and cry and hug and share what we feel. And so this came from a place also that was expressed in a different way, that perhaps the cultural background teaches us that anger, frustration, fear, all of those things are associated with negativity. It's like you are weak, you are not appropriate to feel that. But that's not what you should focus on. You should focus on that you are a human being. And while we are grateful to have, time and focus on positiveness, it is also okay to realize that we are human beings and that we need to have this time for ourselves. It is important, I think everybody realizes, important to take a step back. And in fact, it was even stressed that we need this time to recoup in order to not only reflect, but to grow. And as human beings, when we do that, we grow and we move forward and further. But we also had another theme, which is that this situation was somewhat imposed on us. I mean, COVID-19 is not something that we could avoid or we could ignore or we could escape or we can go to another country and say, what the heck about the politics? It's there and we have to face it. And now people also have expressed ways of how can I use my skills in order to perhaps apply my skills to more immediate benefit, to things that I can perhaps change and a little bit indeed like moving things a little bit forward. Perhaps as an editor and a magazine editor, one can think about, perhaps I can take care of social justice. I can take time for this. And that could be also part of a positive experience. And in a sense, it's like getting involved, being more engaged to turn a bad situation into a positive experience with this constant connection on where am I? What part do I have to play in this whole story? And that was an interesting theme. But the final part that we also discussed many more things, but I'm not going to take the whole time, of course, is education. And education, and perhaps what we are faced here into this political turmoil is to realize that there are multiple aspects to it. First of all, we have to grow the ability to critically process information that we are provided with. And that's very important, and that goes through education. And education can be done at community level, little steps, little local steps that can basically snowball into a bigger step or a bigger outcome. But the other thing is that, which was interesting, is that the political climate has essentially put someone from this administration that didn't create the problems, but bring out of the shadow that we already had here among us. But we never learned how to cope with those things. We escaped it. We refused to talk about it. And perhaps another thing is that if we learn together at a micro level and as an individual to work on how to address our own shadows, yes, then we will actually learn to not react right, on people playing with our unconscious and emotional space. And that we realize that if we can achieve that, then it's a global change in terms of communication at our community, in the country, and at a global level.
Wonderful. And it is true that at times we suppressed things because there were other things distracting us that were positive. But then some of the negative things, as you have said, continue to be there and have now been amplified or exposed. Nalini, would you like to report out? You're muted.
Apologies. Thank you. Thank you. So much of what has been shared already by the other facilitators was part of our dialogue in our small but mighty breakout group, but I will share a few things. One idea was that we've been tested in 2020. We've been tested from the very beginning in 2020. It's been a year of lots of uncertainty and the unexpected. And wouldn't it be a really cruel joke if we started the year being tested with this mysterious virus that then ended up shutting us down and compelling us to take stock literally of what's in our shelves and what's in our homes, and then who's in our orbit in terms of our relationships and how they're doing. And wouldn't it be a cruel joke if we spent all this time taking care of all that only to have our world flip on November 3rd or soon thereafter? And so the hope and the prayer was that we find that there's been an evolution that has taken place. And it was reported out from our group that it's been rather disheartening to see 49.4 versus 49.4. And there was a curiosity that, is it possible that half of the country has actually worked really hard to evolve themselves and learn as much as they can by reading books and watching documentaries and joining networking groups or other groups in which they can expose themselves to greater diversity and really learn how they can make themselves better and more fair and more just, while potentially we've created a greater divide against the other half of the country, which perhaps has chosen to dig its heels into the ground and stay in an entrenched position. And the expectation that our group members had was that there would be a slope here. There would be a nice steep slope, not a level 50-50 happening. And that has bred sadness and disappointment, even if the election does go a certain way, but it still seems to be grating upon us. So then we discussed, well, what are we doing to deal with the compounded stress of COVID-19 and economic upheaval and concern about social distancing and holidays coming up and not being able to be near people. So the practices from my group were being outdoors. So whether it's biking or hiking, one of our members went hiking in Bear Mountain recently, or whether it happens to be prayer and developing a practice of prayer or gratitude. And one of our members said, the election compounded with COVID together are making me more prayerful. I'm praying every 5 minutes and I'm hoping for a more pleasant 2021. No more negativity. Let's have people be more kind. Let's be more educated at every level of politics, whether it's the local level, whether it's our own block or our own building. Let's try to get more involved and influence. And to overcome that disappointment, trying to find ways to have access to communication, to checking in, to psychotherapy, to reaching out to people, whether they look like us or they don't look like us, and finding some kind of common ground, some kind of way to, not hold hands in real life because we can't, but to figuratively hold hands and be there for each other as we try to go through a rough patch. There was one person in our group who shared about being an international student and the fear ever since the current president has taken away the international student visas, about being able to stay in the country and being able to complete her degree that she started and has paid money for and has been studying. She doesn't know if she can complete her degree. I can attest that in my small business, I have an intern who's a graduate student at a university here in New York, and she doesn't know if she can stay either. So I heard this member of our group share this scary story, and she said, I feel like I'm more concerned about how this election will affect me personally than some of my American classmates are, because the future of my education and my career are riding on this. So there's a lot riding on everything. There's a lot of suspense, not just around what happens over the next X number of hours, but what happens over the next few weeks and months in terms of how do we come together politically, socially, in a civil way, and how do we find a way to address the reality that this mirror of this election has held up to our faces about who we really are, and how do we actually address that. And the theme of my group was, let's not stay in powerlessness, let's really try to reach out and connect, and we have to do that by first checking in with ourselves.
Wonderful. I agree that self-check-in was a predominant theme across all of our discussions. We've really been in what I would call a contactless civil war. We have been fighting a fight where we just are looking at where we fit in this whole equation, how people are acting and reacting. In our group, we had a woman who's 70 years old who said, we've been here before. How did we take our eye off the prize? How did we let this happen again? And yes, if we are actually to recover, we have to start with making sure we're on solid ground, because if we're on sinking sand, it's going nowhere. We also talked about in our group just the shocking feelings that we had when we saw the demographics flash on the screen as the election, as the numbers were coming in. Shocking at what we were seeing in terms of the colors, red and blue, right? The divide, red and blue. Someone else in our group said, I'm dealing with the fact that despite being exposed and all of the horrible things that have come to light about our leaders and the way they think and the people who they value, some of my closest family and friends did not change the way they voted. How do I process that? How do I deal with that? But we also talked about that hope and the joy and the optimism in humanity, because we still have people who are like-minded. We recalled our opening speaker's statement, it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. And so after this election, this is one event. We are still alive. We have to figure out what our next step is. We truly have to take the time, and this current, recurring theme of stepping back, stepping away from things that are unhealthy habits, unhealthy practices, embracing things that will help us to fortify ourselves, figure out why you're mad at someone and the way they voted. Is it because of who they voted for? Or are you more concerned about what they stand for? Do I really know you? What are your values? What have I missed? And so just having a lot of these honest conversations, but taking in the fact that we can't control everything. We're going to feel anxious. We're going to feel concerned. And we have filled our days with a lot of other activity, phone banking, calling, doing this. Those things are going away. But we have to find what our new normal is, keeping our conviction in sight. So I want to applaud my group that, thank them for sharing. The sharing was good. I just have a few additional comments to share with you guys as we're here today to reflect, regroup, repeat the journey forward, reflect, regroup, retreat. So we had a strategy at the beginning of COVID. We found a strategy. We found a calling with the social justice issues. We all had something to do. But all I can say is this is it. Now at this point in time, we have to figure out what's next for us as individuals. What's next? We stand firm where we face forward and we remain under grace. There is a word of scripture that says, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. This means that even if you are not the smartest or strongest or most knowledgeable or best looking, God, whoever you believe in, your spiritual guide, can give you grace to be okay. At this point, when we look at the way the election returns have come in, initial shock, right? We expected a blowout. We didn't see it. But what we are seeing is a steady and incremental change. Isn't that our lives? Steady and incremental change. That change is more sustainable. We've been working through the trauma of every day, and today we need to try to remember to celebrate all the small wins, because together the small wins will help us get to change. In John Lewis's last masterful work, which is called Across That Bridge, A Vision for Change and the Future for America, he said, the unity of the people is the most powerful force in the world. Imagine what we could accomplish if all the people on this planet decided to unite to take a coordinated action on a single issue. Well, I'm looking at numbers coming in, and I see people coming together to exercise their right to vote. It's a trickle, but that trickle is filling up a river, and that river will flow into an ocean. John Lewis said, people asked me, what happened to the dream? Why are we still here? We're only 50-something years from getting the right to vote. He said, the dream is us. We're the dream. Many before us couldn't conceive of where you or I would be today. We are the dream. The truth is that the dream marches on. It's not connected to an individual. You can kill a man, but the truth that he stands for will never die. When Stacey Abrams lost the governor's election in the state of Georgia in 2018 by 0.5%, she turned her dismay into action. We are today applauding her for creating 2 nonprofits because of her anger and her passion. She created Fair Count, which drove home efforts to ensure citizens of Georgia were active and counted in the census and received representation, and Fair Fight, which focused on dismantling voter suppression tactics. Look at Georgia today. They should not be blue, but for one woman who decided that she was going to make a difference. My loss is going to be someone else's gain. So ask yourself, how am I feeling today? On the eve of, we don't know what will happen, I reflect on the words of a few people we would call freedom fighters and equality fighters, but they were ordinary people. In 1963, Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. In 2008, Barack Obama said, this is our moment. In 2019, Stacey Abrams said, I'm going to lead from the outside. And in 2020, John Lewis said, the dream is us. We're the dream. Don't be discouraged, because years from now, when we reflect on this election or the things we've done, the alliances we've built, the laws we've changed, the statutes that have come down, the change in people's attitudes, we will see that we change the course of history, one step at a time. We are the dream. We've got to keep dreaming. And so my encouragement for you is check in with yourself. Make your plan for going forward because you've done a remarkable job. Believe in yourself and what you stand for, and keep moving forward under grace. Thank you.
Bravo.